Hey everyone, welcome back to Botanic Haven. I'm so glad you're here with us today. For those of you who are new, this channel is all about gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces we all dream about, whether that's indoors in your cozy living room or outside in your backyard sanctuary. We're here to share tips, tricks, and honestly just the joy of watching things grow. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind lately, and I think it's going to really excite you if you're looking for a plant that practically guarantees success. We're diving into a topic that's perfect for beginners and experienced gardeners alike. Plants that always seem to produce a harvest, no matter what. I'm talking about those reliable, forgiving plants that don't require a degree in horticulture to grow successfully at home. Let me start by saying that not all of us were born with a green thumb. And that's completely okay. I've met so many people over the years who tell me they've killed every plant they've ever owned, and they're convinced they're just not meant to be gardeners. But here's the thing. It's usually not about you being bad at gardening, it's about choosing the right plants to start with. Some plants are just naturally more demanding. They need specific temperatures, precise watering schedules, perfect soil conditions, and the list goes on. But there are others, beautiful and productive ones that are so easygoing they practically grow themselves. These are the plants I want to focus on today because everyone deserves to experience the satisfaction of harvesting something they grew with their own hands. Now, when I say a plant always produces a harvest, I mean it's reliable, resilient, and forgiving of the little mistakes we all make. Maybe you forgot to water for a few days, or perhaps you didn't get the soil mix exactly right. These plants don't hold grudges. They keep growing, keep producing, and they reward your efforts even when those efforts aren't perfect. One of my absolute favorite examples and the star of today's conversation is the humble tomato plant. Particularly cherry tomatoes. I know you might be thinking tomatoes are overdone or too common, but hear me out. There's a reason tomatoes are one of the most popular home garden plants in the world, and it's because they deliver results consistently. Cherry tomatoes specifically are like the overachievers of the plant world. They're compact enough to grow in containers on a balcony, they produce fruit abundantly throughout the growing season, and they're incredibly forgiving when it comes to care. I remember talking to a gardener named Daisy last summer who told me she'd never grown anything in her life before trying cherry tomatoes. She started with a single plant in a pot on her apartment balcony, following some basic instructions she found online. Within a few months, she was harvesting handfuls of sweet, juicy tomatoes every few days. She said it transformed her mornings, going out to check on her plant with her coffee, picking a few ripe tomatoes and feeling this incredible sense of accomplishment. That's the magic we're after here. But let's get practical. What makes cherry tomatoes so reliable? First, they're adaptable. They can handle a range of temperatures, though they do love warmth and sunshine. If you live somewhere with cool summers, you can grow them in containers and move them to the sunniest spot available, or even bring them inside on particularly cold nights. They're also relatively pest-resistant compared to some other crops, and while they can get issues like aphids or tomato hornworms, these problems are usually manageable with some basic attention. The key is that cherry tomatoes want to grow. They're not finicky. Give them decent soil, regular water, plenty of light, and they'll reward you with fruit. It's really that straightforward. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. I genuinely love hearing from you all because it helps me understand what you need and what works in your specific situations. Gardening isn't one size fits all, and your feedback shapes the content we create here at Botanic Haven. So let's talk about how to actually grow these tomatoes at home and set yourself up for success. The first thing you need is the right container if you're not planting directly in the ground. Cherry tomatoes can grow in surprisingly small spaces, but they do need room for their roots. I'd recommend a pot that's at least 5 gallons in size. Bigger is better if you have the space. Make sure it has drainage holes at the bottom because tomatoes hate sitting in waterlogged soil. Root rot is one of the few things that can really derail your tomato growing adventure, and it's entirely preventable with proper drainage. Next, let's talk about soil. You don't need anything fancy, but you do want something that drains well and has some nutrients. A good quality potting mix works perfectly. You can add some compost if you have it, which gives your plants a nice boost of organic matter and beneficial microbes. I like to mix in a handful of compost at planting time, and then add a bit more as a top dressing every few weeks during the growing season. It's like giving your plant a nutritious meal without overwhelming it with synthetic fertilizers. Some gardeners swear by adding crushed eggshells to the soil for calcium, which can help prevent blossom end rot, a condition where the bottom of the tomato develops a dark, sunken spot. I've tried it myself and noticed good results, so it's worth considering. When it comes to planting, you can start from seeds or buy seedlings from a garden centre. Both work wonderfully. If you're starting from seeds, begin them indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before your last expected frost date. Plant them in small pots or seed trays, keep the soil moist but not soggy, and place them in a sunny window or under a grow light. Seeds usually germinate within a week or so, and watching those first tiny leaves emerge never gets old, trust me. Once the seedlings are a few inches tall and the weather outside is consistently warm, you can transplant them into their final containers or garden spots. Here's a little trick I learned from a gardener named Oliver who's been growing tomatoes for decades. When you transplant your seedlings, bury them deeper than they were in their starter pots. Tomatoes are unique because they can grow roots along their stems, so if you bury part of the stem, it'll develop additional roots, making the plant stronger and more stable. Just remove the lower leaves before planting so they don't end up underground. This technique gives your tomato plant a robust root system, which means better nutrient uptake and more resilience against stress. Sunlight is crucial for tomatoes. They're sun worshippers through and through. Aim for at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily, though more is better. If you're growing indoors or in a spot that doesn't get much natural light, consider investing in a grow light. Modern LED grow lights are energy efficient and can provide the full spectrum of light your plants need. I know it might seem like an extra expense, but if you're serious about growing food indoors, it's worth it. Plus the joy of harvesting fresh tomatoes in the middle of winter when everything outside is frozen? Priceless. Watering is where a lot of new gardeners get nervous, but it's simpler than you think. Tomatoes like consistent moisture, which means you want the soil to stay evenly moist but never waterlogged. Stick your finger into the soil about an inch or two deep. If it feels dry, it's time to water. If it's still moist, wait another day. During hot summer days, you might need to water daily, especially if your plants are in containers. In cooler weather or if you're growing indoors, you might water every few days. The key is paying attention to your specific plant and environment rather than following a rigid schedule. One thing I've noticed over the years is that inconsistent watering can lead to problems like cracked fruit or blossom end rot. If the soil goes from bone dry to soaking wet repeatedly, the plant gets stressed and the fruit can split as it tries to absorb all that water at once. Try to keep things steady. Mulching around the base of your plant with straw, wood chips, or even shredded newspaper can help retain moisture and regulate soil temperature, which makes your job easier and keeps the plant happier. Let's talk about feeding your tomato plant because, yes, they do appreciate a little extra nutrition as they grow. Once your plant starts flowering and setting fruit, it's working hard and using up nutrients quickly. I like to use a balanced organic fertilizer every couple of weeks during the growing season. You can find tomato-specific fertilizers that have a good ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, often labeled with numbers like 10-10-10 or 5-10-10. The phosphorus, that middle number, is particularly important for fruit production. You can also use compost tea, which is just compost steeped in water as a gentle liquid fertilizer. Your plant will show you if it's hungry by producing fewer flowers or smaller fruit. But with regular feeding, you'll keep that harvest coming strong. Supporting your tomato plant is another important step. Cherry tomatoes can get quite bushy and heavy with fruit, so they benefit from some kind of support structure. A simple tomato cage works great, or you can use stakes and tie the main stem to them as the plant grows. This keeps the plant upright, improves air circulation around the leaves, which helps prevent fungal diseases, and makes harvesting easier because you're not digging through a tangled mess of vines on the ground. I remember a gardener named Rose who didn't stake her first tomato plant, and by midsummer it had sprawled across half her patio. She still got fruit, but she said harvesting was like a treasure hunt, and not always in a good way. As your plant grows, you might notice small shoots called suckers, growing in the joints where branches meet the main stem. Some gardeners remove these to focus the plant's energy on fruit production, while others leave them to get a bushier plant with more potential fruiting sites. With cherry tomatoes, I usually leave most of them because these plants are so productive anyway, and the extra branches mean even more tomatoes. It's really a matter of personal preference and how much space you have. If your plant is getting too crowded or you're worried about airflow, prune a few of the suckers. If you've got room and want maximum harvest, let them grow. Pest management is something we need to touch on because even the most reliable plants can attract unwanted visitors. Aphids, those tiny green or black insects, love tomato plants. They cluster on new growth and suck sap from the leaves. If you spot them early, a strong spray of water can knock them off. You can also use insecticidal soap or introduce beneficial insects like ladybugs, which eat aphids like candy. Tomato hornworms are another potential problem. These are large green caterpillars that can devour leaves surprisingly fast. They're easier to spot than aphids and can be removed by hand if you're not squeamish. Drop them in soapy water and they're done. Keeping an eye on your plant regularly means you'll catch problems early before they become serious. Diseases can occasionally pop up, particularly fungal issues like early blight or powdery mildew. These often happen when leaves stay wet for long periods or when air circulation is poor. Watering at the base of the plant rather than from above helps keep the foliage dry. Spacing plants properly and pruning for good airflow also makes a big difference. If you do notice yellowing leaves or spots, remove the affected leaves promptly to prevent the disease from spreading. In most cases, especially with cherry tomatoes, the plant will keep producing even if it loses a few leaves here and there. Now let's talk about the actual harvest, because this is where all your care pays off. Cherry tomatoes typically start producing fruit about 60 to 80 days after planting, depending on the variety and growing conditions. You'll see small yellow flowers first, which are incredibly cute, and then tiny green tomatoes will begin to form. Watching them ripen is one of the most satisfying parts of gardening. They'll gradually change colour from green to yellow to orange or red, depending on the variety. Some cherry tomatoes are even purple or striped, which adds a fun visual element to your garden and your salads. The best time to harvest is when the tomatoes are fully coloured and slightly soft to the touch. They should come off the vine easily with a gentle twist. If you have to yank hard, they're probably not quite ready. One of the beautiful things about cherry tomatoes is that they ripen at different rates, so you'll have a continuous harvest rather than a single overwhelming wave of fruit all at once. This means you can pick a handful for dinner tonight, a few more for tomorrow's lunch, and keep enjoying fresh tomatoes for weeks or even months. A gardener named Ivy told me she started weighing her cherry tomato harvest out of curiosity and was shocked when she realised a single plant gave her over 10 pounds of fruit in one season. 10 pounds from one plant in a pot on her balcony. That's dozens and dozens of tomatoes, way more than you'd get from buying a single tomato plant at the store. The value proposition alone makes home growing worth it, not to mention the taste. There's something about a tomato that ripened on the vine, warmed by the sun, that you can't get from a grocery store. The flavour is richer, sweeter, more complex. It's the difference between listening to music on tinny phone speakers versus a good sound system. Once you've tasted a homegrown tomato, it's hard to go back. Beyond cherry tomatoes, there are other plants that fit this always produces a harvest category. And I want to mention a few because variety is the spice of life. Herbs, for instance, are incredibly reliable and useful. Basil is a superstar. It grows fast, produces abundantly, and you can harvest leaves throughout the season. The more you harvest, the bushier it gets, which means even more leaves. Basil loves warm weather and sunshine, much like tomatoes, so you can often grow them side by side. They're also natural companions in the kitchen, perfect for caprese salads, pasta sauces, and pesto. Mint is another herb that's almost impossible to kill. In fact, mint's biggest issue is that it grows too well and can take over a garden if planted directly in the ground. I always recommend growing mint in containers to keep it contained. It'll give you fresh leaves for tea, cocktails, desserts, and more, and it requires minimal care. Just keep the soil moist and give it some light, and it'll thrive. I've had mint plants survive through neglect that would have killed more delicate herbs 10 times over. Lettuce and salad greens are also fantastic for beginners. They grow quickly, you can harvest outer leaves while the plant continues to produce from the center, and they don't need a lot of space. You can grow lettuce in shallow containers, window boxes, or garden beds. They prefer cooler weather, so they're perfect for spring and fall growing, or even winter in mild climates. A gardener named Lucas told me he grows lettuce year-round on his kitchen windowsill using a small container and a grow light. He picks fresh salad greens for dinner every night and hasn't bought lettuce from the store in over a year. That's the kind of self-sufficiency that gets me excited. Radishes are another quick-win crop. They go from seed to harvest in about a month, which makes them perfect if you're impatient or want to introduce kids to gardening. There's something magical about planting a tiny seed and pulling up a crunchy, peppery radish just a few weeks later. Radishes don't need much space and they're not picky about soil. They're also a good indicator plant because if radishes aren't growing well, it usually means there's a problem with your soil or watering that you can address before planting more demanding crops. Zucchini and summer squash are legendary for their productivity. In fact, there are jokes in gardening communities about zucchini plants producing so much that you end up leaving bags of them on neighbors' doorsteps because you can't eat them all fast enough. 1 or 2 zucchini plants can keep a family supplied with squash all summer long. They do need more space than cherry tomatoes or herbs, and they're heavy feeders. But if you have a garden bed or large containers, they're absolutely worth growing. The flowers are even edible and delicious when stuffed or fried. Beans, particularly bush beans, are another reliable choice. They fix nitrogen in the soil, which means they actually improve the growing medium for other plants, and they produce pods prolifically once they start. You can harvest them as snap beans when young and tender, or let them mature and dry on the plant for dried beans. They're low maintenance, don't usually need support structures like pole beans do, and they're satisfying to pick. There's something about the snap of a fresh bean pod that's just pleasant. Strawberries deserve a mention too, especially for anyone who wants to grow fruit but doesn't have space for trees. Strawberry plants are perennials, meaning they come back year after year and they produce runners that create new plants, so your strawberry patch will actually expand over time. They can be grown in containers, hanging baskets, or special strawberry planters with pockets. The first strawberry you pick and eat warm from the sun will make you understand why people go through the effort of growing them. They're sweet, fragrant, and unlike anything you'll find at the store. Now I want to circle back to some overarching principles that apply to all of these reliable, productive plants. First, start with good quality seeds or seedlings from a reputable source. It might cost a bit more upfront, but the difference in germination rates and plant health is noticeable. Second, pay attention to timing. Many plants have specific growing seasons. Tomatoes and basil love summer heat. Lettuce and radishes prefer cooler weather. Planting at the right time sets you up for success. Check your local frost dates and growing zones to understand what works best in your area. Third, observe your plants regularly. Spend a few minutes each day just looking at them. You'll notice changes, spot problems early, and develop an intuition for what they need. Gardening is as much about paying attention as it is about following instructions. Your plants will tell you when they're thirsty, when they're getting too much sun, or when pests are moving in. You just have to learn their language, which comes with time and practice. Fourth, don't be afraid to experiment. Gardening isn't a precise science, especially when you're dealing with different microclimates, soil types, and weather patterns. Try different varieties of tomatoes to see which ones you like best. Plant herbs you've never heard of. Test out unusual vegetables. Some will work great, others might flop, but you'll learn something from every attempt. I've had spectacular failures in my gardening journey, plants that just refused to cooperate no matter what I did, and those experiences taught me as much as my successes. Fifth, be patient with yourself. New gardeners sometimes expect instant results or get discouraged when something doesn't go perfectly. Remember that even experienced gardeners lose plants sometimes. Weather, pests, diseases, and just bad luck can interfere. What matters is that you keep trying, keep learning, and celebrate the wins when they come. That first tomato, that first handful of herbs, that first salad made entirely from your own garden, those moments are worth every bit of effort and every mistake along the way. I also want to emphasize the emotional and mental health benefits of growing your own food, even if it's just a small pot of herbs or a tomato plant. There's something deeply satisfying about nurturing a living thing and watching it grow. It connects you to natural cycles, to the seasons, to the earth in a way that modern life often doesn't. Gardening has been shown to reduce stress, improve mood, and give people a sense of purpose and accomplishment. On days when everything feels chaotic, going outside and tending to your plants can be incredibly grounding. For those of you who are growing food at home for the first time or thinking about starting, I want you to know that you absolutely can do this. You don't need a huge backyard, expensive equipment, or years of experience. You just need a willingness to try, a bit of patience, and maybe a cherry tomato plant to get you started. The resources are out there. There are countless online communities, videos, articles, and forums where gardeners share their knowledge freely. Here at Botanic Haven, we're committed to being part of that supportive community, offering practical advice, encouragement, and celebrating your successes with you. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a challenge. If you've been thinking about starting a garden or growing something edible at home, pick one plant from what we've discussed today and commit to trying it. Maybe it's a cherry tomato in a pot on your balcony. Maybe it's a little container of basil on your kitchen counter. Maybe it's a quick crop of radishes in a garden bed. Whatever it is, take that first step. Get the seeds or the seedling, prepare your container, plant it, and see what happens. Document your journey, take photos, share your progress in the comments here. I'd love to see what you grow and hear about your experiences, the surprises, the challenges, and the triumphs. Gardening is a journey, not a destination. Even after years of growing plants, I still learn something new every season. I still have plants that don't produce as well as I hoped, and I still have those magical moments when everything comes together perfectly and I'm harvesting more than I can eat. That's the beauty of it. It's always evolving, always teaching, always offering another chance to try something new. The plants we've talked about today, cherry tomatoes, herbs, lettuce, radishes, beans, strawberries, and all the others, they're your allies in this journey. They want to grow. They want to produce. Your job is just to give them the basics and let them do what they do best. I hope this conversation has inspired you and given you practical information you can use right away. Growing your own food, even on a small scale, is empowering. It's a skill that's been part of human life for thousands of years, and there's a reason it's experiencing a resurgence now. People are craving that connection, that self-sufficiency, and that satisfaction of eating something they grew themselves. You're part of that movement, whether you're growing one plant or a whole garden. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today here at Botanic Haven. I'm excited to hear about your gardening adventures, so drop a comment below, let me know what you're planning to grow, and share any questions you have. Until next time, happy gardening, and may your plants always give you a bountiful harvest.